Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the exploration ship Harmony's Edge, staring at the main screen with confusion written across his face. For the past 3 hours, his crew had been trying to figure out what they were hearing from. Deep space. The sound was unlike anything they had ever picked up before. "Play it again, Lisa," Jake said to his science officer. Lisa Campbell pressed a few buttons on her console. The bridge filled with a haunting melody that seemed to drift through the speakers like a ghost. It was beautiful and sad at the same time. The notes rose and fell in patterns that reminded Jake of something from his childhood, but he could not place what it was. "It definitely sounds like a violin," said Ben Rodriguez from his position at the navigation station. "My grandmother used to play violin when I was little. This sounds just like it." Jake nodded slowly. "But how is that possible? We're 15 light years from Earth, and this signal is coming from even further out. Who would be playing violin? Music in the middle of nowhere?" Lisa looked up from her instruments with excitement in her eyes. "Captain, I think I know where it's coming from. The signal is originating from the Kepler 442 system. There's something there that's been sending this music into space." "Something?" Jake asked. "I'm not sure yet. It's big, whatever it is. Maybe a space station or a ship, but it's been quiet for a long time. The only thing it's doing is playing this music over and over again." Amy Foster, the communications officer, turned around in her chair. "Captain, there's something else. The music isn't just random. There are patterns in it. Mathematical sequences hidden in the melody. It's like someone is trying to tell us something." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. In all his years exploring space, he had never found any sign of intelligent life beyond Earth. Humans had been alone in the galaxy, as far as they knew. But this music suggested something different. Someone had made it, and someone was broadcasting it. "How far is Kepler 442? Jake asked Ben. "About 6 days at our current speed, Captain." Jake thought for a moment. They were supposed to be mapping star systems in this region of space, looking for planets that might be suitable for human colonies. But this discovery could be far more important than finding new worlds to live on. "Change course," Jake ordered. "Take us to Kepler 442 and keep monitoring that signal. I want to know everything we can learn about it before we get there." Over the next 6 days, the crew of Harmony's Edge worked around the clock to understand the mysterious music. Dr. Kevin Walsh, their expert on alien archaeology, spent hours listening to the recordings and comparing them to Earth's musical traditions. "It's definitely based on human music," Kevin told Jake during one of their daily briefings. "The scales, the timing, even the emotional structure. But it's not exactly any piece I can identify. It's like someone took the essence of human violin music and created something new from it." Lisa had been running scans of the Kepler 442 system, and what she found made the mystery even deeper. "Captain, the star in that system is dying. It's going through its final stages before it becomes a white dwarf. Whatever is out there, it won't survive much longer." Maya Thompson, the ship's engineer, looked puzzled. Why would anyone build something around a dying star? That doesn't make any sense. Maybe they didn't know the star was dying when they built it, suggested Chris Baker, their pilot. Or maybe they built it there for a reason we don't understand yet. Tony Garcia, the security chief, was more cautious. "We need to be careful. We don't know who or what we're dealing with. This could be a trap." But Dr. Sophie Mitchell, the team psychologist, disagreed. "I've been analyzing the emotional content of the music. There's no aggression in it, no threat. If anything, it sounds sad, lonely, like someone calling out for connection." As they got closer to Kepler 442, the music signal grew stronger. It also began to change in subtle ways. The tempo became slightly faster, and new harmonies appeared that hadn't been there before. It's responding to us, Amy said with wonder in her voice. The closer we get, the more complex the music becomes. It knows we're here. On the 6th day, they finally arrived at the Kepler 442 system. What they saw on their screens took their breath away. Orbiting the dying orange star was a massive structure that looked like nothing humans had ever built. It was sleek and elegant, with curves that seemed to flow like music made solid. The structure was easily 10 times larger than the biggest space station Earth had ever constructed. "My God," whispered Lisa, "it's beautiful." The music was now so clear, it seemed to fill the entire ship. Jake could feel it in his bones, a melody that spoke of loss and hope and something else he couldn't quite name. It was the most beautiful and heartbreaking thing he had ever heard. "Captain," Ben called out, his voice tight with excitement, "I'm picking up other signals now. Weak ones, but they're there. The station isn't completely dead. Some systems are still active." Jake made his decision. "Take us closer, but slowly, and keep all weapons powered down. I don't want whoever built this to think we're a threat." As Harmony's Edge approached the alien station, the violin music swelled to a crescendo that seemed to welcome them. Jake could see his crew was as moved by it as he was. Even Tony, usually the most suspicious member of the team, had tears in his eyes. "Captain," Amy said softly, "I'm getting a feeling that this music isn't just communication. It's more than that. It's like a greeting card that's been waiting in space for someone to find it." "But greeting us how?" Jake asked. "How would they even know about human music?" Lisa looked up from her console with an expression of amazement. "Captain, I think I know. The electromagnetic signatures I'm reading suggest this station has been here for hundreds of years. And some of these systems look like they were designed for long-range monitoring. What if they've been watching us? What if they've been listening to Earth's radio broadcasts for centuries?" The thought sent chills through the entire crew. Someone had been watching humanity from across the galaxy, learning about them, studying their music. And now that someone was calling to them with the most beautiful violin melody any of them had ever heard, Jake looked at his crew and saw the same mix of fear and wonder in their faces that he felt in his heart. They were about to make first contact with an alien intelligence, and it was greeting them with music. "Prepare a boarding party," Jake ordered. "It's time to meet our cosmic neighbors." Captain Jake Morrison led the boarding party through the airlock, connecting their ship to the alien station. The artificial gravity felt strange under his feet, lighter than Earth normal, but somehow more comfortable. The air that filled his helmet, when he removed it, smelled faintly of flowers and something else he could not identify. "The atmosphere is safe," Dr. Ryan Brooks confirmed, checking his medical scanner. "Actually, it's perfect for humans. Better than the air on most of our own ships." The corridor they entered was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. The walls curved gracefully, seeming to flow like frozen water. Soft light came from everywhere and nowhere, making it impossible to find the actual light sources. The violin music was louder here, no longer distant, but surrounding them like a gentle embrace. Amy Foster walked beside Jake, her communication equipment beeping steadily. "Captain, the music is definitely coming from deeper in the station, but there are other signals too. Data streams, power readings, even what looks like active computer systems." "Active?" Jake asked. "You mean someone might still be alive in here?" "I don't know. The signals are strange. Not like any technology we understand." Dr. Kevin Walsh was already taking pictures of the corridor walls. "Look at these patterns," he said excitedly. "They're not just decorative. These curves and lines follow mathematical sequences. It's like the entire station is built according to some kind of musical formula. They move deeper into the station, following the sound of the violin." The corridors branched and curved, but somehow Jake never felt lost. It was as if the station itself was guiding them toward their destination. Lisa Campbell stopped at what looked like a control panel built into the wall. Unlike human technology, this panel had no buttons or switches. Instead, it was covered with crystals of different colors and shapes. "Captain, I think this might be some kind of interface, but I have no idea how to use it." Maya Thompson joined Lisa at the panel. As an engineer, she was always curious about new technology. "The crystals are responding to our presence," she observed. "Look, they're getting brighter as we get closer." Almost without thinking, Maya reached out and touched one of the larger crystals. Immediately, the panel came alive with light and sound. The violin music grew louder, and suddenly a voice filled the corridor. The voice was clearly not human, but it spoke perfect English with only a slight accent. "Welcome, visitors from the third planet of Sol. We have been waiting for you for a very long time." The boarding party froze. Jake felt his heart racing as he realized they were about to make first contact with an alien intelligence. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthship Harmony's Edge. Who am I speaking to?" "I am the memory keeper of the Zealoty people. I am what you might call an artificial intelligence, though that term does not fully describe what I am. I contain the stored consciousness of my creators, their memories, their hopes, their dreams." "Where are the Zealoty now?" Jake asked gently. "There?" Was a pause before the voice answered, and Jake could hear something like sadness in its tone. "The Zealoty are gone, Captain Morrison. Our son died 300 of your years ago. I am all that remains of our civilization." The corridor fell, silent except for the violin music, which seemed to grow even more beautiful and heartbreaking. Jake felt tears in his eyes as he realized they had arrived too late to meet the beings who had called to them across space. "But you are here now," the voice continued, and Jake could hear joy mixing with the sadness. "The Zealoty spent their final years preparing for your arrival. We knew that someday the people of Earth would travel to the stars. We hoped that when you did, you would hear our music and come to find us." Amy stepped forward. "How did you know about us? How did you learn our language?" "The Zealoty have been listening to your radio transmissions for over 200 of your years. We learned your languages, studied your cultures, and fell in love with your music. Earth broadcasts have been our window into your world." The AI guided them through the station, opening doors and activating systems as they moved. Jake saw rooms filled with strange equipment, halls lined with what looked like artwork, and chambers that seemed designed for purposes he could not guess. "This station is a cultural archive," the AI explained. "It contains the complete history of the Zealoty people, along with everything we learned about Earth and humanity. But it is also something more. It is a gift." They entered a vast chamber that took Jake's breath away. The room was filled with musical instruments, but not like any instruments from Earth. Some looked familiar. There were things that might be violins or pianos, but others were completely alien. Crystals that hummed when light touched them, metal sculptures that sang in the station's artificial breeze, and devices that seemed to create music from pure thought. "The Zealoty were musicians and artists," the AI said. "We believe that music was the universal language, the one thing that could bring different species together. When we learned about human music, we knew we had found kindred spirits." Dr. Sophie Mitchell, the team psychologist, was studying the instruments with fascination. "These are incredible. Some of them seem to respond to emotions rather than physical." "Touch. Indeed," the AI replied. "The Zealoty developed music as a form of communication that went beyond words. We could share our deepest feelings through sound alone." Ben Rodriguez had been quiet since they boarded the station, but now he spoke up. "Why did you choose violin music to call us?" Why not something else? The AI's response was immediate and warm. The violin was the first human instrument the Zelothy learned to love. In your year 1952, we detected a radio broadcast of a human child playing violin. The music was simple, full of mistakes, but it contained such pure joy that it moved our entire civilization. We spent decades learning to play violin music, hoping that someday we could play it for the humans who created it. Jake felt a lump forming in his throat. An entire alien civilization had fallen in love with humanity based on a child's violin practice session broadcast into space by accident. The Zelothy built this station as a meeting place. The AI continued. We hoped that when humans finally traveled to the stars, they would find us here. We planned to share our music with yours, to learn from each other, to become friends across the vastness of space. Tony Garcia, ever practical, asked the question that was on everyone's mind. But you said the Zelothy are gone. What happened to them? Our sun began to die faster than our scientists predicted. We had time to evacuate our people to other worlds, but we could not take everything with us. So we built this station to preserve what was most important to us: our art, our music, our love for the universe, and all the life within it. The AI paused, and when it spoke again, its voice was filled with something that sounded like hope. But we also built it as a test, Captain Morrison. The Zelothy discovered something wonderful in your human broadcasts. You are a species that creates beauty even in the darkest times. You make music during wars, write poetry during plagues, and paint pictures even when your world is ending. A test? Jake asked. The Zelothy were not the only civilization we studied, Captain. We observed many species as they developed and reached for the stars. But humans were unique. You were the only species we found that regularly sacrificed for strangers, that created art to heal pain rather than to celebrate victory. A violin music swelled around them, joined now by other instruments from the chamber. It was a symphony of hope and loss, of love that had traveled across centuries to finally find its destination. The test, Captain Morrison, is what you do with what we leave you. The Zelothy archives contain more than just our history. They contain the locations of other civilizations, other species that may need help. The question is, what will humanity do with that knowledge? Jake looked around at his crew, seeing the same mixture of awe and responsibility in their faces that he felt in his heart. They had come looking for the source of a mysterious signal, but they had found something much more important. They had found proof that love could survive the death of stars, and a challenge that would define humanity's future among the stars. Maya Thompson wiped the sweat from her forehead as she worked on the alien control panel. The technology was unlike anything she had ever seen, but somehow it felt familiar. The patterns and connections reminded her of musical instruments more than machines. Every wire seemed to follow the rhythm of the violin music that still played softly through the station. Try connecting the blue crystal to the silver node, Chris Baker suggested from beside her. He was holding a strange device that looked like a tuning fork made of metal that shifted colors in the light. The Zelothy seemed to organize everything by sound frequencies. Maya nodded and made the connection. Immediately, a section of the wall came alive with soft light. Images began to appear, moving pictures that told a story neither of them was prepared for. The holographic display showed the Zelothy in their final days. They looked almost human but taller, with longer fingers and eyes that seemed to hold deep sadness. Maya watched as one of the aliens sat in what looked like a music room, holding a violin. But this was not just any violin. It was clearly made by human hands, with the familiar wooden body and metal strings that Maya recognized from Earth. How did they get a human violin? Chris whispered. The hologram continued, showing the Zelothy learning to play the instrument. Maya could see the alien's fingers moving awkwardly at first, then with growing skill. The creature's face showed intense concentration, and then something that looked like joy when it finally managed to play a simple melody. More images followed. Dozens of Zealothi learning human instruments. Pianos, guitars, drums, and violins. They had entire orchestras of aliens playing Earth music with a passion that brought tears to Maya's eyes. But there was something heartbreaking about it all. The aliens looked tired, desperate, like they were running out of time. "Maya, Chris, you need to see this," came Tony Garcia's voice over the communication system. "I'm in what looks like a planning room. There are star charts here, and Earth is marked with special symbols." Maya and Chris hurried through the station's curved hallways to find Tony standing before a massive holographic map of the galaxy. Earth glowed with a warm golden light, and there were lines connecting it to dozens of other star systems. But what caught Maya's attention were the ship designs floating next to the map. "They were building a fleet," Tony said, his voice filled with wonder. "Look at these ships. They're not weapons. I don't know what to call them. Art galleries? Concert halls?" The ship designs were beautiful, with sections clearly meant for performance spaces and display areas. Maya could see rooms designed to hold orchestras, galleries for artwork, and what looked like cultural exchange centers. These were not warships or trade vessels. They were ships meant for sharing beauty and knowledge. Dr. Sophie Mitchell joined them, carrying a small device that was projecting sound. "I found their personal logs," she said. "The translation system is amazing. Listen to this." A voice filled the room, speaking in accented but clear English. It was obviously an alien voice, but it spoke with such warmth that Maya felt her heart skip a beat. Day 4847 of the Earth Observation Project. Today I learned to play what humans call amazing. Grace on the violin. The sadness in this music speaks to something deep in my soul. How can a species create such beauty while facing such hardship? Their wars rage across their planet, yet they still make time for music, for love, for hope. We Zealothi have lived in peace for thousands of years, yet we have never created anything as moving as a simple human lullaby. Sophie played another recording. A different voice, also speaking English with that same careful pronunciation. Day 5012. Our star grows weaker each day. The Council estimates we have perhaps 50 Earth years before our sun dies completely. We have enough ships to evacuate our people, but where will we go? More importantly, how can we leave this galaxy? Without meeting the humans? They have shown us what it means to live with passion, to create beauty in the face of death. We must find a way to thank them. Maya felt tears running down her cheeks. They were in love with us, she whispered. An entire alien civilization fell in love with humanity, and we never knew. Chris activated another display, and suddenly, the room filled with the sound of a full orchestra. But this was not human music. It was something new, something that blended human melodies with alien harmonies in a way that was almost too beautiful to bear. The music spoke of longing, of love across impossible distances, of a dream that could never be fulfilled. "They were composing a symphony for us," Sophie said, her voice breaking. "A musical gift they planned to present when they made first contact." More recordings played as the team explored deeper into the station. They learned that the Zealothi had spent nearly 200 years studying human radio and television broadcasts. They had learned human languages, human history, human art. They knew about Earth's wars and suffering, but instead of being repelled, they were inspired by humanity's ability to create beauty despite pain. Day 5445. Today, we detected another human radio drama. It was called Romeo and Juliet by their Shakespeare. The story broke our hearts, but the language, the passion, the willingness to die for love. How do they do it? How do they love so? Fiercely when they know life is so short? We Zealothi live for thousands of years, yet we have never felt anything as deep as what these humans call love. Maya discovered a workshop where the Zealothi had been building instruments. Not just copies of human instruments, but new designs that combined human and Zealothi musical traditions. There were violins with extra strings that could produce harmonies impossible on Earth instruments. Pianos with keys that responded to thought, as well as touch. Drums that could create rhythms that seemed to make the very air dance. Dot in the center of the workshop was a single, perfect violin. It was made of materials that seemed to glow with their own inner light, and when Chris gently touched one of the strings, it produced a note so pure and beautiful that everyone in the room stopped breathing. Attached to the violin was a message, written in English, for the humans who taught us what it means to love. Though we will never mate, you have given our lives meaning. Please remember us not for how we died, but for how you taught us to live. They built all of this for us, Maya said, gesturing around the station. This whole place is a love letter to humanity. They spent their final years learning about us, creating art for us, preparing gifts they knew they would never be able to give. Sophie found the final recording. The voice was older now, weaker, but still filled with that incredible warmth. This is our last message. Our star will die within days, and our evacuation ships have already departed for distant galaxies. But we could not leave without finishing this project. We have gathered everything we learned about humanity, every piece of music we composed, every instrument we built. We are leaving it here, in this station, in the hope that someday humans will find it. When you hear our music, know that somewhere, in the galaxy, an entire civilization loved you before they ever met you. We believe humans will someday travel to the stars. When you do, please remember the Zealothi. Remember that love is the only force in the universe, stronger than death. The violin music that had been playing softly throughout the station suddenly swelled, filling every room with a melody so beautiful that it seemed to come from the heart of the universe itself. Maya realized that this was not just music. It was the sound of love transcending time and space, the echo of a civilization's final gift to the species that had shown them what it meant to truly live. Dr. Kevin Walsh stood in the center of what the Zealothi had called their Gallery of Worlds. The room was enormous, with a domed ceiling that showed a perfect view of the stars outside. But Kevin's attention was focused on the thousands of crystal displays that lined the walls. Each crystal contained the complete history of a different alien species. "Ryan, you need to see this," Kevin called to Dr. Ryan Brooks, his ship's medical officer. The Zealothi weren't just watching humans. They were studying dozens of civilizations across the galaxy. Ryan joined Kevin at one of the crystal displays. When Kevin touched it, the crystal came alive with images of a planet covered in purple. Oceans. Strange creatures with 6 legs and flowing tentacles moved through underwater cities that sparkled like jewels. "The Aquarii of the Vega system," a soft voice explained. The translation system had learned to speak in a gentle tone that reminded Kevin of his grandmother reading bedtime stories. A peaceful species that created art from living coral. They faced extinction when their sun began to produce deadly radiation. The Zealothi observed their final years with great sadness. Kevin moved to another crystal. This one showed flying creatures that looked like dragons made of light. They built cities in the clouds of a gas giant, structures that danced through the sky like living music. "The Skysingers of Proxima Centauri," the voice continued. "They communicated through songs that could be heard across their entire world. When their planet's atmosphere began to fail, they sang a final chorus that lasted for 3 of their years. The Zealothi recorded every note. Ryan activated a third display. It showed creatures that looked almost like walking trees, with bark-like skin and leaves growing from their arms. They moved slowly, but with great purpose, tending gardens that covered entire continents. The forest walkers of Kepler 186f, the voice said. They lived in harmony with their planet for millions of years. When a disease began killing their forests, they chose to die with their trees rather than abandon their world. The Zelethi found their devotion to nature deeply moving. How many species did they study? Kevin asked the room. The Zelethi maintained detailed records of 47 intelligent species over a period of 800 Earth years, the voice replied. Of these, 31 faced extinction during the observation period. The Zelethi documented their final days with great care and respect. Ryan felt a chill run through him. 31 extinct species. That's a lot of death for one galaxy. Kevin moved deeper into the gallery, stopping at displays that showed creatures so alien he could barely understand what he was looking at. Some were made of pure energy. Others seemed to be living machines. There were beings that existed in multiple dimensions and creatures that lived in the cores of stars. But as Kevin studied the records, he began to notice something strange. In every case, the Zelethi had notes about what made each species special. The Aquari created art that could heal emotional pain. The Skysingers had developed music that could predict weather patterns. The Forest Walkers had learned to communicate with plants in ways that increased crop yields by incredible amounts. They were looking for something, Kevin realized. The Zelethi weren't just observing these species. They were studying what made each one unique. Ryan activated another display, this one showing a species that looked remarkably like humans, but with silver skin and 3 eyes. The Sylvani of Wolf 359, the voice explained. They developed technology that could extend life indefinitely. They shared this knowledge freely with other species and were known throughout their region of space as healers and teachers. What happened to them? Ryan asked. They chose to end their own existence when their sun went supernova. Rather than flee to safety, they stayed to help evacuate 3 younger species from nearby worlds. All Sylvani died in the evacuation effort, but they saved over 2 billion lives. Kevin and Ryan looked at each other with growing understanding. The Zelethi were studying what makes a species worth saving, Ryan said quietly. They continued through the gallery, learning about species after species. Some had created incredible art. Others had developed amazing technology. Some were known for their wisdom, others for their courage. But in every case, the Zelethi had found something admirable, something worth remembering. Then Kevin found the human section. It was larger than any of the others, taking up an entire wall of the gallery. The displays showed Earth's history from the Zelethi perspective, starting with the first radio broadcasts they had detected in the early 1900s. Humans of Sol 3, a voice said, and Kevin could hear something different in its tone. Warmth, maybe even love. Initial observation began in Earth year 1923, when the Zelethi detected radio transmissions containing what appeared to be recreational music. This was the first evidence the Zelethi had encountered of a species creating art purely for emotional enjoyment. The displays showed the Zelethis' growing fascination with humanity. They had recorded everything: radio shows, television, programs, music concerts, even phone conversations that had been accidentally broadcast into space. Kevin watched decades of human history play out through alien eyes. The humans demonstrated qualities that surprised Zelethi observers, the voice continued. Despite facing constant warfare, disease, and natural disasters, they continued to create art, music, literature, and other forms of beauty. More remarkably, they often created their most moving art during their darkest periods. Ryan stopped at a display showing footage from World War II. They were watching us during the war? The Zelethi were particularly moved by human behavior. During conflicts, the voice explained, while most species the Zelethi observed became more violent and primitive during wartime. Humans often became more creative and compassionate. They wrote poetry in trenches, painted murals in bomb shelters, and composed symphonies in concentration camps. Kevin found displays showing human music from every era: classical compositions, jazz, rock and roll, hip-hop, electronic music. The Zelothy had studied it all, trying to understand how humans could create such emotional complexity through organized sound. Human music contains mathematical patterns that reflect emotional states, the voice said. This was unprecedented in Zelothy observation. Other species created organized sound for communication or ritual purposes, but humans were the first to create sound specifically to convey and evoke emotion. But it was the final section that took Kevin's breath away. The display showed humans helping other humans during disasters, rescue workers pulling people from burning buildings, doctors treating patients during epidemics, volunteers building homes for the homeless, ordinary people sharing food with strangers. Of all the species, the Zelothy observed, humans were unique in their willingness to sacrifice for strangers, the voice said. Most intelligent species showed loyalty to family groups or tribal units. Humans regularly risked their lives for individuals they had never met and would never see again. Ryan discovered a crystal that contained Zelothy analysis of human psychology. According to this, they couldn't understand why we help people who can't help us back. They spent decades trying to figure out the evolutionary advantage of human compassion. What conclusion did they reach? Kevin asked. Ryan read from the crystal's display. The Zelothy determined that human compassion served no survival advantage for individuals, but created a survival advantage for the entire species. They theorized that humans evolved the ability to care for strangers because it made human civilization more stable and adaptable. Kevin stared at the displays around him. 47 species, each remarkable in their own way. 31 of them extinct. And the Zelothy had chosen humanity as the most worthy of contact, not because humans were the strongest or the smartest, but because they were the most willing to sacrifice for others. We weren't just their favorite, Kevin realized. We were their hope. They saw something in humanity that they thought could save the galaxy. The violin music that had been playing softly throughout the station suddenly grew louder, more complex. New instruments joined the melody, creating a symphony that seemed to celebrate not just humanity, but all the lost civilizations the Zelothy had loved and remembered. Kevin understood now why the Zelothy had spent their final years creating this station. It wasn't just a gift to humanity. It was a test. They had left behind the knowledge of 46 other species, along with the locations of civilizations that might still be saved. The question was, what would humanity do with that knowledge? Captain Jake Morrison sat in the central chamber of the Zelothy station, staring at the holographic display that showed 17 star systems scattered across the galaxy. Each system pulsed with a soft red light, indicating civilizations that were dying or in immediate danger. The weight of what he was seeing pressed down on him like a physical force. "Tell me again about the Veltari system," Jake said to the station's computer dot. The gentle voice responded immediately. "The Veltari are a species of crystalline beings who exist in the asteroid belts of their solar system. Their sun is expanding into a red giant. They have approximately 8 Earth months before the radiation destroys their crystal formations. Population, 4.7 million individuals." Nicole Adams, the communications specialist, looked up from her console with tears in her eyes. "Captain, I've been listening to their broadcasts. They're still creating art, still teaching their children, still living normal lives. They don't know what's coming." Jake moved to another display. "What about the Corvani?" "The Corvani homeworld orbits a binary star system where one star has become unstable. Massive solar flares are destroying their atmosphere. They have built underground cities, but their food production is failing. Estimated survival time, 14 Earth months. Population, 800 million. Amy Foster had been working with the translation systems for hours, trying to understand the full scope of what the Zealothi had left behind. Captain, it's not just the locations. They left us everything. Ship designs, faster than light travel. Technology that's centuries ahead of ours. Terraforming equipment. Even medical knowledge that could cure diseases we haven't figured out yet. Ben Rodriguez pulled up star charts on his tablet. The distances are incredible, though. Even with their technology, it would take us months to reach each system. And we're talking about evacuating millions, maybe billions of beings. Dr. Sophie. Mitchell had been unusually quiet since they discovered the scope of the crisis. The psychological profiles the Zealothi compiled show that most of these species don't even know they're in danger. Some of them have never developed space travel. How do you convince an entire civilization to abandon their homeworld when they've never left their own planet? Jake walked around the chamber, studying each of the 17 pulsing lights. The Zealothi computer had been very clear about what was at stake. These were the last known intelligent species facing immediate extinction. If humanity did nothing, 17 entire civilizations would die within the next 5 years. Show me what it would cost, Jake said. The holographic display changed, showing Earth and the surrounding systems that humanity had colonized. Lines appeared, connecting Earth to each of the 17 endangered worlds. Numbers scrolled past, showing the resources, ships, and personnel that would be needed for a full-scale rescue operation. Maya Thompson let out a low whistle. Captain, this would require every ship in the Earth fleet, every transport, every construction vessel, every military ship we have, and it would take decades. What about our own expansion plans? Chris Baker asked. We've got colony ships heading to 30 different systems. Millions of humans are counting on those colonies for new homes and opportunities. Tony Garcia had been studying the tactical implications. If we commit everything to these rescue missions, we'd have to abandon almost all of our current projects. The Mars terraforming project, the asteroid mining operations, the new colonies. Earth's economy would have to completely restructure. Jake nodded slowly. He understood the magnitude of what they were being asked to consider. Humanity had finally reached the stars, had finally begun to spread across the galaxy. They had plans for hundreds of colonies, dreams of a human empire that would span thousands of worlds. And now they were being asked to give all of that up to save people they had never met. What do the Zealothi records say about species that faced similar choices? Jake asked. The computer's voice took on a sadder tone. The Zealothi observed 14 instances where spacefaring species discovered endangered civilizations. In 11 cases, the spacefaring species chose to prioritize their own expansion. In 3 cases, they attempted limited rescue operations while maintaining their expansion plans. And how did those limited rescue operations work out? All failed. The resources required for successful evacuation and relocation of entire civilizations exceeded the capabilities of divided efforts. The endangered species were lost. Dr. Kevin Walsh had been analyzing the Zealothi's own history. Captain, I found something interesting. The Zealothi faced a similar choice about 600 years ago. They discovered a dying species called the Nethani. The Zealothi had just developed faster-than-light travel and were planning to explore and colonize the galaxy. What did they do? They saved the Nethani. It took them 200 years and most of their resources, but they evacuated the entire species and helped them settle on a new world. The Zealothi say it was the most important thing they ever did. Jake looked around at his crew. These were good people, the best humanity had to offer. They had volunteered for deep space exploration, knowing they might never see Earth again. But this decision would affect not just them, but every human alive. The records show that 17 civilizations will die if we do nothing, Jake said. Slowly, but they also show the technology to save them. The question is, what kind of species do we want to be? Lisa Campbell spoke up for the first time in hours. Captain, I've been running calculations. If we use the Zealothy technology for these rescue missions, we'd learn more about space travel, engineering, and xenobiology in 10 years than we would. In a century of normal exploration, the knowledge we'd gain could advance human civilization by thousands of years. But at what cost? Ben asked. We'd be giving up our chance to build a human empire. Our children and grandchildren would inherit a galaxy where humans are just one voice among many, instead of the dominant species. Nicole had been listening to more of the broadcasts from the dying worlds. I've been hearing their music, their poetry, their stories. Captain, these aren't just statistics. These are entire cultures, millions of years of history and art and knowledge. If we let them die, all of that will be lost forever. Amy pulled up images from the Zealothy records. Look at what we'd be losing. The Veltari create crystal sculptures that can store memories for thousands of years. The Corvani have developed mathematics that could revolutionize our understanding of physics. The Thurani have art forms that exist in 11 dimensions. Jake stared at the 17 pulsing lights, each one representing millions of lives. He thought about humanity's dreams of expansion, of building cities on distant worlds, of spreading human culture across the galaxy. But he also thought about the Zealothy, who had spent their final years not conquering or expanding, but learning to love species they would never meet. The Zealothy chose us, Jake said quietly. Out of 47 species, they chose humanity to receive this knowledge. They believed we would make the right choice. The violin music that had been playing softly throughout their time on the station suddenly swelled, joined by instruments from dozens of different worlds. It was the sound of the galaxy itself, all the voices that had been silenced and all the voices that could still be saved. Jake looked at each member of his crew, seeing his own struggle reflected in their faces. They all understood what was at stake. Humanity stood at a crossroads. They could choose the path of expansion and power, building an empire among the stars. Or they could choose the path of compassion, becoming the guardians of a galaxy full of endangered life. We need to make a decision, Jake said. And whatever we choose will define what humanity becomes for the next 1,000 years. The fate of 17 civilizations hung in the balance, waiting for the answer that would determine not just their survival, but the kind of species humanity would choose to be. Captain Jake Morrison stood before the communication array on the Harmony's edge, his hand hovering over the controls that would send his message back to Earth. Behind him, his crew waited in silence. They had made their choice, and now they had to tell humanity what they had decided. Earth Command, this is Captain Morrison of the Harmony's Edge. We are transmitting detailed records of what we have discovered here. 17 intelligent species are facing extinction within the next 5 years. We have the technology to save them, but it will require everything we have. Jake paused, thinking about the words that would change human history forever. We recommend that humanity abandon all current expansion plans and dedicate our entire fleet to rescue operations. The Zealothy have given us a chance to become something greater than conquerors. They have given us the chance to become guardians of life itself. 6 months later, Jake stood on the bridge of the rescue ship New Harmony, the largest vessel humanity had ever built. The ship was constructed using Zealothy, technology and powered by engines that could cross the galaxy in weeks instead of years. Behind them followed a fleet of 200 rescue vessels, each one capable of evacuating entire cities. The first mission was to the Veltari system. Jake watched through the main screen as they approached the asteroid belt where the crystalline beings lived. The red giant sun loomed dangerously close, its radiation already causing some of the smaller asteroids to melt. "Captain, we're receiving communications from the Veltari," Nicole Adams reported. They're singing to us." The bridge filled with the most beautiful sound Jake had ever heard. It was like wind chimes made of starlight, musical tones. That seemed to resonate in his bones. The Veltari were welcoming them with a song that needed no translation. Maya Thompson had been working with Veltari engineers for weeks, learning how to safely transport beings made of living crystal. Their city asteroids can be moved intact if we're careful. We've designed special containers that will protect them during the journey to their new home. The evacuation took 3 weeks. Jake watched as millions of crystalline beings, each one glowing with their own inner light, were carefully relocated to a safe system 200 light years away. The Veltari had adapted quickly to the idea of leaving their home, understanding that survival was more important than staying in one place. On the final day, the eldest of Veltari approached Jake's ship. Through the communication system, it spoke, in a voice like singing crystal. "We have heard the story of the Zealothi from your records. They loved you across time and space, and now you love us across the darkness between stars. We will remember this always. The songs we sing for the next 1,000 years will tell of the humans who heard our music and came to save us." The second rescue was harder. The Corvani homeworld was a planet of vast underground cities, and the inhabitants had never seen the surface or the stars above. Convincing 800 million beings to leave the only world they had ever known required patience and careful diplomacy. Dr. Sophie Mitchell worked with Corvani leaders for months, helping them understand that their world was dying. The Corvani were a logical species, and once they understood the science behind their sun's instability, they began to prepare for evacuation. "They've never seen another world," Sophie told Jake during one of their planning sessions. "To them, the underground tunnels of their planet are the entire universe." We're asking them to imagine something they can't even picture. But the Corvani proved to be remarkably adaptable. When they saw the surface of their new world for the first time, with its open sky and distant mountains, many of them wept with joy. They had been given not just survival, but a chance to discover beauty they never knew existed. One by one, the rescue missions continued. The tree-like Sylvani were relocated from their dying forest world to a planet with soil so rich that their new trees grew twice as tall as their old ones. The aquatic Depani were moved from their poisoned oceans to a world with seas, so clear that their cities could be seen from space. Each rescue brought new challenges and new rewards. The humans learned languages made of color and light. They discovered art forms that existed in dimensions they had never imagined. They heard music that changed the way they understood the universe itself. But more importantly, they learned about themselves. Working alongside alien species, humans discovered that compassion was not just a human trait. Every species they saved showed the same willingness to help others that had made humanity special. To the Zealothi, the Veltari shared their memory-storing crystals, allowing humans to preserve history in ways that would last forever. The Corvani taught humans new mathematics that led to better space travel technology. The Sylvani showed humans how to grow food in environments that had seemed impossible to farm. 5 years after the first rescue mission, Jake returned to the Zealothi station. He was no longer a young captain, and his hair had gone gray from the stress and excitement of the rescue operations. But he had never been prouder of humanity. The station had become a meeting place, a cultural center where representatives from all the rescued species gathered to share knowledge and art. The violin music still played, but now it was joined by crystal songs from the Veltari, harmonic mathematics from the Corvani, and living melodies from the Sylvani. Jake stood in the awe. central chamber where he had first made the decision to save the 17 worlds. Now those worlds were safe, and their inhabitants were thriving in new homes across the galaxy. But more than that, they had become part of something larger. "Computer," Jake said to the station's AI, "how many species are part of the Alliance?" "Now, the Harmony Coalition now includes 43 species across 812 worlds." The gentle voice replied, "Population, approximately 2 trillion individuals." Nicole Adams, now an ambassador rather than a communications officer, joined Jake in the chamber. "The Thirani just sent word that they've discovered 3 more endangered species in the Andromeda. Spiral, they're asking if humanity can help lead another rescue mission." Jake smiled. "Of course we can. That's what we do now." Through the station's great windows, Jake could see ships from dozens of different species docked at the expanded facilities. Crystalline vessels from the Veltari, organic ships that the Silvani had grown from living wood, and sleek metal craft. From species that humanity was still learning to understand. "Do you ever regret it?" Nicole asked. "Giving up our chance to build a human empire?" Jake thought about the question as he watched a group of young humans learning crystal song from Veltari teachers. He thought about the human colonies that were never built, the resources that were never claimed, the territories that were never conquered. "No," he said finally. "We didn't give up an empire. We gained a family." The violin music swelled around. Them now part of a symphony that included voices from across the galaxy. It was the sound of love transcending every barrier, the echo of the Zealothy's faith in humanity proven right. Outside the station, the stars shone brighter than ever before. They no longer looked empty and cold to Jake. They looked full of life, full of voices singing together in harmony, full of civilizations that existed because humanity had chosen love over conquest. The Zealothy had been right about humans all along. When faced with the choice between power and compassion, humanity had chosen to become the guardians of the galaxy. And in saving others, they had found their true purpose among the stars. The violin played on, an eternal reminder that love was indeed the strongest force in the universe, capable of bridging any distance and lasting longer than any star.